After that night, nothing looked the same. Not the office, not the silence in my house, not even myself. Once you realize something inside you is awake, you can't pretend it's sleeping again. You can ignore it, distract yourself, bury it under responsibility, but it doesn't go away. It waits. That's what my feelings did. They waited quietly while I tried to act normal. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was overthinking a simple connection because my life had been empty for too long. Loneliness can make ordinary kindness feel extraordinary. I knew that. I reminded myself of it every day. Still, my heart didn't listen. I became hyper aware of him, of how close he stood, of how easily my name left his mouth, of how my mood shifted when he walked into the room. That awareness brought fear with it, because awareness leads to questions, and questions lead to truth. So I did what I always did when emotions became uncomfortable. I fought them. I built invisible walls again. I kept conversations short. I avoided moments where we might be alone. I surrounded myself with work, noise, people, anything that could keep me from thinking. On the outside, I looked composed. On the inside, I was arguing with myself constantly. This is wrong. This is foolish. You are old enough to know better. I reminded myself of my age like it was a warning sign. 43, divorced, a mother, a woman with history, a woman who had already had her chance at love. I told myself he was just being kind, just curious, just young. But kindness doesn't linger like this. Curiosity doesn't feel like comfort, and youth doesn't explain understanding. I noticed how he never rushed me when I spoke, how he didn't fill silence with noise, how he seemed to sense when I was tired, even when I said nothing. No one had paid attention to me like that in years. That scared me more than rejection ever had, because rejection hurts once, attachment hurts twice. Once when it begins, and once if it ends. I didn't want to feel that pain again. The world around me didn't help. People notice things before you're ready for them to. A glance held too long, a conversation that feels different, silence that feels loaded. They didn't say much at first, they rarely do. Instead, they warned, be careful. You're at different stages of life. Men his age don't know what they want. I nodded, I agreed, I smiled. Because on the surface, they were right. But no one asked me how lonely I had been before this. No one asked how long it had been since someone really listened. No one asked when I had stopped believing I deserved softness. At night, those unasked questions echoed louder than their advice. I began questioning myself in ways that felt cruel. Am I confusing attention with love? Am I holding on to something because I'm afraid of being alone forever? Am I stealing something from his future just by being here? Guilt became my constant companion. Guilt for wanting him. Guilt for enjoying conversations. Guilt for smiling more than I had in years. Women like me are taught to feel guilty for wanting joy after a certain age, as if happiness is something we should have finished using by now. I tried to pull away again, this time more firmly. I avoided shared spaces, declined conversations, found reasons to be busy. I convinced myself distance was the responsible choice, the mature choice. But distance doesn't weaken feelings, it sharpens them. I missed him in ways that felt quiet and shameful. When something funny happened and I wanted to tell him first, when something difficult weighed on me and I instinctively thought of his presence. That's when I understood something I didn't want to admit. If he disappeared tomorrow, it would hurt. And that meant this mattered. Life has a cruel sense of timing. Just when I thought I had things under control, it tested me. Old wounds reopened, a reminder of my past, of why I had built walls in the first place. I carried that weight all day, pretending I was fine, performing strength like I always did. By evening, I was exhausted. That's when he saw me. not the composed version, not the capable version, the tired one. I didn't plan to open up, it just happened. A crack in my voice, a pause that lasted too long, a silence that said everything. He didn't push, he didn't ask too much, he just stayed. There is something deeply unsettling about being seen when you are not prepared for it, about being witnessed without judgment, without advice. I told him about my marriage, about how small I had felt near the end, about how invisible I had become afterward, about how being strong had slowly drained me. I didn't expect understanding. I expected discomfort. What I got was presence. He listened the same way he always did, quietly, fully. He didn't interrupt or minimize my pain. He didn't tell me I'd be okay. He let me be honest. That moment changed something fundamental inside me. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't performing strength. I wasn't managing perception. I wasn't protecting anyone from my truth. I was just human. That's when I realized the truth I had been avoiding. This wasn't curiosity. This wasn't loneliness. This wasn't a phase. This was love, or something close enough to be just as dangerous. And love, at my age, doesn't feel exciting first. It feels terrifying. Because loving him meant risk of judgment, risk of loss, risk of explaining myself to people who had already decided what they thought. It meant accepting that this might not last, that it might hurt, that I might look foolish. And after years of carefully avoiding pain, that felt unbearable. So I tried one last time to walk away. I told myself this was the right thing to do, the kind thing, the sensible thing. I convinced myself distance was the responsible choice, the mature choice. But distance doesn't weaken feelings, it sharpens them. I missed him in ways that felt quiet and shameful. When something funny happened and I wanted to tell him first. When something difficult weighed on me and I instinctively thought of his presence. That's when I understood something I didn't want to admit. If he disappeared tomorrow, it would hurt. And that meant this mattered. Life has a cruel sense of timing. Just when I thought I had things under control, it tested me. Old wounds reopened. A reminder of my past, of why I had built walls in the first place. I carried that weight all day, pretending I was fine, performing strength like I always did. By evening, I was exhausted. That's when he saw me. Not the composed version, not the capable version, the tired one. I didn't plan to open up, it just happened. A crack in my voice, a pause that lasted too long, a silence that said everything. He didn't push, he didn't ask too much, he just stayed. There is something deeply unsettling about being seen when you are not prepared for it, about being witnessed without judgment, without advice. I told him about my marriage, about how small I had felt near the end, about how invisible I had become afterward, about how being strong had slowly drained me. I didn't expect understanding. I expected discomfort. What I got was presence. He listened the same way he always did, quietly, fully. He didn't interrupt or minimize my pain. He didn't tell me I'd be okay. He let me be honest. That moment changed something fundamental inside me. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't performing strength. I wasn't managing perception. I wasn't protecting anyone from my truth. I was just human. That's when I realized the truth I had been avoiding. This wasn't curiosity. This wasn't loneliness. This wasn't a phase. This was love, or something close enough to be just as dangerous. And love, at my age, doesn't feel exciting first. It feels terrifying. Because loving him meant risk of judgment, risk of loss, risk of explaining myself to people who had already decided what they thought. It meant accepting that this might not last, that it might hurt, that I might look foolish. And after years of carefully avoiding pain, that felt unbearable. So I tried one last time to walk away. I told myself this was the right thing to do, the kind thing, the sensible thing. I convinced myself distance was the responsible choice, the mature choice. But distance doesn't weaken feelings, it sharpens them. I missed him in ways that felt quiet and shameful. When something funny happened and I wanted to tell him first. When something difficult weighed on me and I instinctively thought of his presence. That's when I understood something I didn't want to admit. If he disappeared tomorrow, it would hurt. And that meant this mattered. Life has a cruel sense of timing. Just when I thought I had things under control, it tested me. Old wounds reopened. A reminder of my past, of why I had built walls in the first place. I carried that weight all day, pretending I was fine, performing strength like I always did. By evening, I was exhausted. That's when he saw me. Not the composed version, not the capable version. I was 43 when I realized something scary. No one was waiting for me anymore. Not for my love, not for my smile, not even for my story. I had become the woman people describe as strong, which is another way of saying alone. And then, someone younger than me looked at me and didn't see my age. He saw me. Before that moment, my life had become very quiet. Not peaceful, quiet. People confuse the two, but they are not the same. Peace feels full, like a deep breath that finally reaches your chest. Quiet feels empty, like a room after everyone has left and the echo hasn't faded yet. That was my life. I woke up every morning already knowing how the day would end. There were no surprises waiting for me, no unanswered questions, no excitement, just routines, neatly arranged, carefully repeated. I wasn't unhappy in the dramatic sense. I didn't cry every night or fall apart in public. I functioned. I managed. I survived. And somehow, survival became my whole personality. People around me often said I was lucky. You're independent. You're settled. You're strong. They meant it as praise. I accepted it as a final sentence. I was divorced. 8 years had passed, long enough for people to stop asking how I was coping, long enough for the pain to become quiet instead of sharp. Divorce doesn't hurt forever the way movies show. It slowly changes shape. It settles into your bones and becomes tiredness. After my marriage ended, I didn't rebel. I didn't rush into another relationship. I didn't make mistakes people could gossip about. I adjusted. I learned how to live without expecting anyone to choose me. My days revolved around responsibility, work, home, my child, who was growing faster than I could keep up with. He loved me, I knew that, but love changes when children grow. One day, you are their world. The next, you are just someone who lives in the same house. Evenings were the hardest. The house would grow silent, and I would sit with my thoughts longer than I wanted to. That silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like being forgotten while still breathing. I stopped dressing for beauty without realizing when it happened. Comfort replaced color. Practicality replaced softness. I told myself it was maturity, growth, acceptance. But deep inside, something felt unfinished. There is a loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being unseen. I missed being seen. Not admired, not desired in some dramatic way, just noticed. I never admitted that to anyone. Women my age aren't encouraged to say things like that. We're expected to be grateful, composed, reasonable. Wanting more is seen as weakness. So I stayed quiet. And then he entered my life in the most ordinary way possible. No destiny, no dramatic moment, just another person stepping into my routine. He joined our workplace on a Monday morning, new, polite, clearly younger than most of us. He carried that kind of energy people have before life teaches them caution. The first thing I noticed wasn't attraction, it was contrast. He moved through the world like time was generous, like mistakes were allowed, like life was something he was participating in, not managing. That made me uncomfortable. I told myself it was nothing, just a colleague, just a phase, just proximity. I kept my distance, professional, controlled, safe. Control had saved me before. Control was how I survived my marriage, my divorce, my loneliness. As long as I stayed in control, nothing could hurt me again, or so I believed. But control becomes fragile when someone listens to you without trying to impress you. At first, our conversations were simple, about work, deadlines, tasks, nothing personal. Then, one day during a quiet moment, he asked me something no one had asked in years. Do you enjoy this work, or are you just good at it? The question caught me off guard. I didn't answer immediately because I didn't know the answer. I had been good at surviving for so long that I had stopped asking myself what I enjoyed. That question followed me home that night. It sat beside me in the silence. It reminded me of parts of myself I had quietly put away. After that, our conversations grew a little longer, still respectful, still appropriate, but more human. We talked about books, about why certain stories stay with you, about how some endings hurt even when they're happy. He listened differently, not like someone waiting to speak, not like someone distracted. He listened like my words mattered, and that scared me. Because when you're a woman in your 40s, connection doesn't feel exciting first. It feels dangerous. It feels like something that could disrupt the careful balance you've built on survival. I felt myself opening without meaning to. I started noticing small things, the way he paused before responding, the way he didn't rush silence, the way he remembered things I mentioned casually, assuming no one would care enough to remember. Attraction fades, but being understood rewires you. That's when I knew I had to stop. I reminded myself of reality. I was older, I had lived through love and loss, I had responsibilities, a past, a child, scars. He was younger, at the beginning of his story. I told myself this wasn't attraction, this was loneliness. This wasn't connection, this was convenience. This wasn't meaningful, it was temporary. So I pulled back. Short replies, professional distance, busy schedules. I avoided moments where conversations could grow beyond necessity. I thought distance would erase whatever was forming inside me, but distance doesn't erase feelings, it sharpens them. I began missing him in quiet ways, in moments when I wanted to share something and stopped myself, in thoughts I caught myself saving for him without meaning to. That's when guilt arrived. Guilt for feeling this way at my age. Guilt for noticing someone younger. Guilt for feeling alive again when I had already accepted my ending. I asked myself late at night, questions with no gentle answers. Am I lonely or am I in love? Am I unfair to him just by feeling this? When did wanting love become something shameful? Women like me are taught early to minimize our needs, to be grateful for stability and quiet, to step aside gracefully. I had done all of that, so why did my heart refuse to cooperate? One evening, as we were leaving work, he asked carefully, "Did I do something wrong?" There was no accusation in his voice, just concern. I wanted to tell him the truth, that this wasn't about him, that I was fighting something inside myself. Instead, I smiled and said, "No, just tired." It was easier than explaining a fear I didn't fully understand yet. That night, sitting alone, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't afraid of him. I was afraid of hope, because hope, once lost, is dangerous to touch again. I didn't know where this would lead. I didn't even know what I wanted. All I knew was this. For the first time in years, I felt awake, and that feeling, more than loneliness, more than judgment, more than age, terrified me.
Loving him didn't change my life all at once. It didn't erase my past. It didn't fix my mistakes. It didn't promise me a future I could hold in my hands. What it did was quieter and far more difficult. It asked me to stop lying to myself. For most of my adult life, I had been living carefully, not cautiously, carefully. I chose words that didn't offend, emotions that didn't disturb, happiness that didn't ask too much from anyone. I learned how to be agreeable, dependable, reasonable. I learned how to disappear without actually leaving. Loving him brought all of that into the light. There were days after I admitted my feelings, if only to myself, when fear sat in my chest from morning to night. Fear of being judged, fear of hurting him, fear of embarrassing myself, fear of starting something I couldn't control. I had built my identity on control. Letting go of it felt like stepping off a cliff. We didn't rush into anything. That surprised people when they eventually noticed us. They expected recklessness, drama, scandal. Instead, we talked. We talked about everything people warned us not to talk about: age, time, expectations, endings. I told him I was afraid of holding him back, afraid of being a chapter he would one day regret, afraid that loving me would cost him something he hadn't even discovered yet. He listened, really listened, and then said something that stayed with me longer than anything else. "I don't feel trapped," he said. "I feel chosen." That sentence unsettled me because I had spent so much time assuming love was something I took from people, not something they offered willingly. I had learned to see myself as a burden long before I ever became one. It wasn't just about age, it was about worth. I realized how deeply I had internalized the idea that women like me should want less, ask for less, be content with less. That wanting love after a certain age was greedy, embarrassing, selfish. No one had said it directly. Society never does. It teaches you quietly, through raised eyebrows, through jokes, through concern, through the way stories like ours are always explained instead of simply accepted. Being with him meant facing all of that. Some days I felt strong enough to carry it. Other days it felt heavy. On those days, I caught myself preparing for loss, imagining endings before they arrived, rehearsing grief just in case. Old habits. He noticed when I pulled away emotionally, when I started protecting myself again. He didn't accuse me. He didn't demand reassurance. He waited. That patience taught me something painful about myself. I had been punishing joy in advance. I believed that if I stayed guarded enough, pain would be smaller when it came. But all I was really doing was shrinking happiness before it even had a chance to breathe. Love doesn't ask you to be fearless. It asks you to be honest. I learned that slowly. I learned it in the quiet mornings when nothing dramatic happened, when we simply existed together without needing to prove anything. I learned it in the evenings when doubt crept in and didn't push either of us away. We didn't pretend the future was simple. Some conversations were hard. We talked about how different our timelines were, about energy, aging, change, about what we could promise and what we couldn't. For the first time in my life, I didn't demand certainty. That was new. In my marriage, I clung to promises because I was afraid of uncertainty. After my divorce, I rejected love altogether for the same reason. Now I was learning a third way: acceptance. I accepted that love doesn't need to be forever to be real, that meaning isn't measured only by duration, that some of the most important things in life are temporary and still priceless. I stopped asking myself how this would end. I started asking how honestly I was living. That question changed everything. I noticed how much lighter I felt when I stopped apologizing for my feelings, when I stopped explaining my happiness in advance, when I stopped shrinking myself to make other people comfortable. I noticed how my voice sounded steadier when I spoke, how my laughter felt less cautious, how I started noticing the world again, colors, sounds, moments I had been walking past for years. Love didn't make me young. It made me awake. There were still difficult days, days when the world felt judgmental and small, days when I wondered how my child would understand me, days when I worried about being misunderstood by people who had known me for years. But I no longer let those fears decide my life. I had already spent too much time living according to expectations that never truly protected me. What surprised me most was how loving him changed the way I saw my past. I stopped viewing my divorce as a failure that disqualified me from happiness. I stopped seeing my years alone as wasted time. I began to understand them as preparation. I had learned resilience. I had learned boundaries. I had learned myself. That knowledge didn't make love impossible. It made it healthier. I wasn't trying to be saved. I wasn't trying to be completed. I was choosing connection. There is power in choosing something with open eyes. One evening, sitting alone after a long day, I realized something that made me cry, not from sadness, but from relief. I wasn't hiding anymore, not from him, not from the world, not from myself. I had stopped disappearing, and that was the greatest gift love gave me. Not romance, not excitement, not validation. Presence. I was present in my own life again. If this love ends one day, I will grieve it. I won't pretend otherwise. But I will never regret living it honestly. Regret grows best in denial, not courage. And courage, I've learned, isn't loud. It's the quiet decision to stop believing that time has taken something from you that it never had the right to claim. I am still a woman in her 40s. I am still cautious. I am still learning. But I am no longer invisible to myself. And that, more than love, more than approval, more than certainty, is enough. For the first time in a long time, I am not waiting. I am living.